Shashi Tharoor is nothing if not offbeat, and his recent candor has left his party red-faced more than enough. But this time, his latest remark may have given the Congress plenty of food for thought. Speaking at the Raisina dialogue, the Thiruvananthapuram MP and former career official at the United Nations praised the balance that the Modi government has maintained between Russia and Ukraine even after the two countries went to war.
I'm still wiping the egg off my face because I was the one person in the parliamentary debate who actually criticized the Indian position at the time, back in February 22, on the well-worn grounds that Espen will understand, because he and I talked about all this in my UN days, that there was a violation of the UN Charter, that there had been a violation of the principle of the inviolability of borders, of the sovereignty of a member state, namely Ukraine, and we had always stood for the inadmissibility of the use of force to settle international disputes, and all of those principles, I said, had been violated by one party, and we should have condemned it. Well, a couple of years later, 3 years later, it does look like I'm the one with egg on my face, because clearly the policy has meant that India has actually a prime minister who can hug both the president of Ukraine and the president of Moscow 2 weeks apart and be accepted in both places, and therefore India is in a position where it can make a difference to a lasting peace, if it was so required, in ways that very few countries would be able to.
Why this is significant is because the opposition parties in India haven't really been on board with this line of thought. Shashi Tharoor himself admitted that he was one of the naysayers and now has metaphorical egg on his face. But why this change of mind? While the cynical ones may read a possible future change of loyalty into it, the truth is it stems from the fact that India, the world's third largest oil consuming and importing nation, spent about 1.5 lakh crores on buying crude oil from Russia since the start of the war in 2021. This actually helped in stabilizing oil prices in our country. In fact, India also refined the oil purchased from Russia and sold it to the West. So striking the balance actually ended up being beneficial to us. Before 2021, India had purchased just 1% of its oil requirements from Russia. This has now gone up to 40%, helping us to save at least $25 billion in foreign exchange.
देर आए दुरुस्त आए अच्छी बात है। आज विदेश नीति में नरेंद्र मोदी की सरकार और उनके द्वारा स्वयं के लिए गए जो भी निर्णय होते हैं वो भारत के हित में होते हैं। जैसे शशि थरूर ने स्वीकारा है वैसे ही कांग्रेस पार्टी के बाकी नेता स्वीकारेंगे तो अच्छी बात है।
I was not aware what he said in the about the Ukraine issue. I was not aware. After some time, I will react.
शशि थरूर जी ने यूक्रेन और रूस के बीच में जिस प्रकार से फरवरी 2022 से युद्ध चल रहा है, उसको लेकर भारत और विशेष करके माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के स्टैंड के ऊपर टिप्पणी करते हुए कहा है कि जब इनिशियल समय था फरवरी 2022 का, उस समय मैंने क्रिटिसाइज किया था प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी का, मैंने क्रिटिसाइज किया था भारत के स्टैंड का। आई हैड क्रिटिसाइज्ड द स्टैंड दैट इंडिया हैड टेकन देन विज़-अ-वी यूक्रेन एंड रशिया वॉर। बट आज जब 3 वर्ष बीत गए हैं, कहीं न कहीं मैं बाध्य होता हूं ये कहने के लिए कि प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने जो डिप्लोमेसी दिखाई वो डिप्लोमेसी आज रंग लाई है, and it's a unique kind of diplomacy.
Mr. Shashi Tharoor went to the tough school of diplomacy, whereas I only studied law, so he's much more experienced than me to talk about diplomacy, so I have really no comments on his views.
India has time and again asserted that far from taking a neutral stand, it is on the side of peace. Even in the case of Russia and Ukraine, this has been the Prime Minister's standard mantra. It's on the side of peace, it's on the side of what is right, and that has been reflected in multiple relationships. Over the past 5 years, India's exports to Ukraine increased at an annualized rate of 23.2% from $618 million in 2018. In 2023, they had reached $1.75 billion. But at the same time, our bilateral trade with Russia also reached a record high of over $65 billion. India and Ukraine have agreed to restore trade and bilateral cooperation to pre-war levels. Not just that, Indian businesses are also exploring opportunities to participate in the reconstruction of the war-torn country, and most importantly, for everyone who has found it incredibly funny to smirk and say war rukwa di papa over the last year, well, guess what? The Deputy Prime Minister of Poland has now acknowledged, not somebody in India, not somebody in the Indian government, but the Deputy PM of Poland has acknowledged that nuclear war to rukwa hi di.
President Putin was threatening to use tactical nuclear weapons on the territory of Ukraine. The Americans sent lots of messages for him not to think about this, explaining him the consequences of it for Russia. But that didn't necessarily persuaded him at first, and he got two phone calls. He got a phone call from President of China, Xi Jinping, and he got a phone call from Prime Minister Modi, telling him that neither China nor India independently do not approve of that kind of move. And faced with the fact that two major nations with which Russia considered to be friendly said don't do it, he then decided that this is not a good idea. So Prime Minister Modi played a role in it.
My first signal: Ukraine wants peace. We want to end this war this year. And having such a friend, such a support from such as countries of global influence as India, we do really could speed up these peace efforts.
India has maintained a similar relationship with America and Russia as well. The US, remember, has been pushing us to buy their weapons. In other words, hinting to reduce their dependency or our dependency on Russia. India has bought new high-tech drones and promised to continue talks on buying F-35 jets without actually finalizing a deal just as yet. At the same time, Russia also remains our most reliable military supplier. India managed to convince Donald Trump that MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, and MEGA, Make India Great Again, equal mega. While Modi and Putin, on the other hand, have also had mega engagements. They have met at least 17 times in the past decade, besides many other interactions on the sidelines of global engagements. There are other warring nations that somehow, in the midst of their entire chaos, continue to embrace India. Classic case: Israel and Palestine. Trade between Israel and us surged from approximately $200 million in 1992 to $10 billion in 2022. But at the same time, since the start of the Hamas-Israel war, India has provided and continues to provide 70 metric ton of humanitarian aid to Palestine. Let's talk about another set of sworn enemies: Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia is our fourth largest trading partner. More than 18% of our crude oil imports are sourced from them. But in Iran's case, the development of the Chabahar port in southern Iran reflects the ties between the two countries. This strategic port serves as a vital trade hub. It connects India to Afghanistan and Central Asia while bypassing Pakistan. So, what do these relationships reflect? They reflect simply that India is not only on the side of peace and on the side of what it thinks is right, but it is always and forever on the side of MEGA. Make India great again. And it's something that even Shashi Tharoor now seems to be echoing.